Welcome, listeners and viewers. My name is Con, and I am the Conversationalist, and welcome to this episode. Very privileged today to have Derrick McManus as my guest. Derrick is a former Star Force officer and now is the Australian Centre for Human Durability. Welcome this morning, Derrick.
Great to be here, Con.
Absolute pleasure to have you, mate. Now, we met a few weeks ago at an event, although I have been familiar with your story being of that age. And for the listeners, because our demographic is quite wide and there are many listeners and viewers in their 20s, I think it's important that we give them some context with regards to your work where you talk about human durability as opposed to resilience, which I want to touch on a little bit later in the interview. There's a defining moment in your life which leads you to this path in 1994 as a Star Force officer. Can you just briefly touch on that for some context for the listeners and viewers, please?
So my job at the time in 1994, I was a member of the STAR Group, which is Special Task and Rescue. And we dealt with high-risk arrest, hostage siege, counter-terrorism, helicopter operations, cliff rescue, cave rescue, all that high-end stuff. I was even part of the VIP security detail to the Queen when the Queen came out. So it's all that high-end stuff, that high adrenaline, which is what I was really loving, but it's also high risk and high demand on our skills. The job that we're talking about at the moment is in 1994, my team were asked to go and arrest a guy in the Barossa Valley for 197 counts of fraud. Not something you normally associate with violence, but we knew his history. They asked Star Group to go out and arrest him because he was high risk. So we went out there, we were wearing full police blue uniform and wearing what we call flak vests. We went to arrest him. He started shooting. I was his target. He fired 18 times with a Chinese military assault rifle. He hit me 14 times with either bullets or shrapnel. I immediately was overwhelmed, but basically instantly, realized what I needed to do to protect myself and survive in the future. And I started firing back. When I fired back, he stopped. I then rolled to my right a couple of times. And despite some massive injuries to every limb of my body, as well as my torso, I managed to get to my feet. I staggered around the corner a short distance. Then my injuries overwhelmed me and I fell to my knees, crawled along, felt my hands and knees, crawled along a little bit further. And then eventually I dropped to the ground, rolled onto my back. And that's where I stayed for about the next 3 hours. The guys in Star Group that I was with were pinned down because of his gunfire. They couldn't get to me. They had to call for backup. Backup was a long way from where we were. We were in the Barossa Valley already, so that's an hour from Adelaide by normal speeds.
Yeah.
Obviously, when we get there in these incidents, it's a little bit quicker. But my backup team was a long way the other side of Adelaide as well. So it took 3 hours for them to be able to get to us to support us. During that 3 hours, I was lying on the ground, constantly bleeding, but constantly monitoring my body. And there were 4 things that I knew I needed to do. The first was to control panic, not let panic take control of me. I had to take control of shock, not let shock take control of my body. I had to slow down my heart rate and I had to slow down my breathing. Now, these are not things that I came up with in the moment of, oh gosh, there's something bad happening. What can I do? Let's get creative.
Yeah.
These are things that I did beforehand. I planned them beforehand. But I was lying there for 3 hours, continuously bleeding for 3 hours. The first doctor to get to me said that he didn't know whether I was dead or alive. He said when he saw me, there was no color, there was no sound, there was no breathing, and I wasn't moving at all. And he said he thought I was already dead, but he described that I took a last gasping breath, and those are his words, a last gasping breath. And he and his team worked their magic, and it really was just virtually magic. They brought me back from the brink.
Goodness me.
I then spent, and this is the long story short, I then spent 28 days in hospital, and then 2.5 years in physical rehabilitation. And I made it back to Star Group on full duties with no restrictions, despite the massive injuries, massive disablements of some of my limbs, but not the disabilities that people normally associate with them. The other thing that we will be talking about a lot today here is resilience and obviously human durability. One of the most important things I did was, as soon as I got into hospital and I started getting things together, and this is within about 5 days, threw my hand in the air and said, get me a psych. I want to talk to a psych. And it was one of the most powerful things I did. And if you think 27 years ago, men talking to psychs, getting therapy, not the most popular thing in the world. But I went and spoke to a psych. All I wanted to do, and this is where the human durability comes into it, all I wanted to do was have some idea of what psychological challenges I might have to manage, and how I best do that. How people have done with it well, dealt with it well, how people have dealt with it badly.
Yeah.
I wanted to have that insight. So if they did hit me, then I'd be able to manage them and have a good chance of a positive outcome.
Wow. Okay.
Through that discussion, just 3 months after the shooting, he cleared me psychologically to go back to work the next day. And I never needed to go back and see him again. Now, this astounded lots of people because it was, everybody expected me to be in therapy for decades. You know, massive trauma, on the brink of death. He'll be in therapy for decades. Cleared, first meeting, never needed to come back and see him again. And this incident, that discussion with the psychologist, this is where my view of both resilience and durability come in, because resilience is always going to be important, but I think we can go further than resilience these days, and that's what the Centre for Human Durability is about.
So we will definitely get onto resilience versus durability in a minute.
Yeah.
Just winding up on this just amazing story of yours. I actually remember the news reports on that night. And it was just phenomenal then, and I still shake my head. How long were you in the force for after that incident? So how long has it been since, let's say, you've come out of the force?
2.5 years after the shooting, I went back to fully operational in Star Group. That incident happened at year 5 in Star Group. I stayed in Star Group for 11 years all up. Seconded out to other areas, but fully operational when I needed to be. I then changed, went back to patrols. I got a promotion to sergeant while I was on patrols. I then I needed to take 4 years leave without pay to look after my son, and that was probably the greatest time of my life that I dedicated to my son. I then came back to the police department and served through to 2018. I only retired in 2018. And was fully operational that whole time. Even though I was working at the academy teaching leadership, if there was an incident happened and they needed extra numbers, I could go fully operational. So the incident, the shooting itself, didn't restrict any of my
your work
operational.
Yeah. When did you start? When did this concept of the Institute of Human Durability, where was that born?
It was born just 4 years ago. I have a very good friend, and you know my good friend Gary Edwards. He and I have always bounced ideas off of each other. Certainly after the shooting, I was invited to speak to lots of corporates, and I resisted it to start off with. But then I was invited to speak to the blood service and thank blood donors who literally saved my life. I started telling that story to them, realized there was more to the story than what I realized or what I first thought. And then I started talking about leadership. I started talking about resilience. And probably about 5 years ago, I started playing with the idea that there was more to this than just bouncing back. Because in the middle of that incident, I didn't bounce back. I knew exactly what was possibly going to happen. And I managed my emotions around what I knew could happen. And this is what everybody needs to do. We need to look at what are the challenges, what are the possible consequences, and how are we going to manage them. And so I didn't bounce back. I sustained what I call an optimal performance. And that's what human durability is about. And it was about 5 years ago, Gary and I were bouncing ideas around with each other. And I came up with this concept of it wasn't resilience, but what was it? What was it? And it came down to it was a sustaining an optimal performance. And then it morphed into human durability. And there's a whole concept behind it, obviously, now.
And I was going to get onto that, but you've given me a great segue. I just want to, from a mere mortal, this is a post that I noticed on LinkedIn this morning, and it's an excerpt from it, and I'd just like to read it out. It's only when we're fully aware of all the opportunities and the fun that the risk may present, as well as all the possible challenges, that we can truly plan and prepare how we are going to manage them. My question to you, and I'm sure a question that everybody that will listen to this will be asking themselves, how can you possibly prepare to be shot 14 times and be clinging to life? How is that? What do? You can't possibly get up in the morning and go, right, okay, I'm going to work today, and there's a high probability that I'm going to be shot. How does one prepare for that?
Okay, so I'm also going to address this mere mortal comment that you made before. How I conceptualize this for whether it's 10-year-old kids in schools, people going into year 12, CEOs, hairdressers, doctors, lawyers, the financial industry. How I conceptualize it for those people is that I prepared myself for what I could realistically expect in my life. My choices were that I was going into Star Group, I was a sniper, I was a recovery diver, and I was a counter-terrorist operative. So there was a real possibility that I may be shot and injured, and I may be shot and killed. It's a reality. But that's a reality that every cop deals with every day they go out in uniform. Now, they do. It's not a high possibility that's going to happen, because if it was a high possibility, we'd have to manage those risks differently. But it is a possibility, and we need to be able to avert our minds to that possibility and then prepare for it. Now, addressing the mere mortal side of it, a lot of people would say, well, yes, you prepared to get shot 14 times. I can never operate at that level. And I like to bring it back to reality and say that you prepare yourself for what you can realistically expect to encounter day by day. You just don't realize it. If you think about the first time you ever drove a car, right? Absolutely overwhelming. Oh my gosh, this beast is going to get away from me. Absolutely filled with fear, trepidation. But there's some belief in you that you should be able to master this skill eventually. And you get into it, you get training, you get exposure, then you get your license, you get more experience. And now when you drive, what do you do when you drive a car now? Talking to the kids in the back seat, you're checking out people walking past, you're doing a bit of window shopping, you're thinking about the next podcast you're going to have. You're doing all these things. But if something happens in front of you that you need to respond to, you're there absolutely instantly. And that's the same thing. You can realistically expect these things to happen to you, and you're able to respond to them. We do the same in our normal life as well. There are things that we can realistically expect to encounter because of things that we've experienced in the past, and we avert our minds to it. The thing that we don't do, let me rephrase that. The things that some people don't do, and I'd like more people to embrace, is to actually consider what are the greatest risks. Because quite often we know what the greatest risks are, but we go, I don't even want to think about that. That's too scary. But we need to think about what they are and just have some idea of what we're going to deal with, and then some idea of how we might deal with it if the worst happens. But having said the worst, we've also got to prepare for the best too. Because sometimes the greatest things happen and people freeze and they go, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do with this. And that opportunity passes us. And so that's all I did in my life. It was taking a realistic look at the fact I was in Star Group. There are a whole heap of great things that happened. And it was adrenaline filled. We had all the best boys' toys you could ever ask for in a job. And I got paid to use them. People paid thousands of dollars to have a weekend with this stuff. But it was adrenaline filled. It was absolutely exciting. I love managing challenges, but it also had some real risks as well. And all I did was I addressed those. And there's the underlying philosophy and the golden circle around the outside of my model for durability is open, honest, confronting conversations. And it goes in line with what Nelson Mandela says, that we can't prepare for the future while secretly pretending it's not going to happen. And that's what happens.
Great line.
It's too big. We don't want to think about it. Then we're not truly preparing for it. And if it does happen, It could potentially destroy our lives, our businesses, our relationships, whatever it might be.
Okay. I hate talking about COVID. I'm just like a lot of people, even though it's there, we're just, I guess, sick and tired of it as we enter day 3 of lockdown here in Adelaide. And I'll address that in a moment. What I do want to talk about is, can you, for the listeners, elaborate or clarify what is the difference, or what you see is the difference of resilience to durability?
Okay, so this fits into, I've got a continuum of durability, and it starts that everything that we start brand new, we're fragile. We're new, we're learning, we do make mistakes. But if we get some good coaching, guidance, mentoring, we can learn how to solve problems and become a good operator within whatever that is, whether it's a sport, whether it's a relationship, whether it's a business. And once we become a good operator, we have the ability to problem solve. And this is identifying what the problem might be and bouncing back from it, solving that problem. And this is the essence of resilience. Resilience is the ability to bounce back. You are a problem solver, and it's a very powerful place to be. And it's a powerful skill to always have. What I say is that living in resilience is stressful. Yes, if we take on a challenge, we need to be able to problem solve those things. But if we only live in an explosion in the Bay of Beirut, in the port of Beirut, in Lebanon, about 3,000 kilograms of chemicals exploded, killed many people, devastated parts of the city. The media and the government were saying the Lebanese people are resilient, they'll be able to bounce back from this. There was a lady who was interviewed, a civilian, and she said, "I'm tired of being resilient. I just want to enjoy my life." And this is when we move past resilience to what I call 100% reliable, where we are absolutely comfortable that we have everything organized. Everything we're going to do is going to go 100% the way we want it. It's predictable, it's comfortable. We can sit back and relax and know that in this space, there is nothing we need to problem solve because we've got it all sorted. And this is where there's no stress. This is where, these are the days that you come to work and you go, this is a great job. I love this job. I know exactly what I'm doing. I know what sort of things are going to come up. And when they come up, I can fix them. I can alleviate them before they need fixing. And that's a really comfortable place to be. And this is the concept of durability, where we are able to sustain an optimal performance for the future and for any challenge that we can anticipate at that level of operation. Now, the very clear distinction is it's an optimal level of performance. It's not peak performance all the time, peak sometimes, but optimal level of performance. And it's at the level that you have been asked to perform or you're deciding to perform, right? It's optimal performance at that level. Now, when we're at that level and we get into this comfort zone, we go, oh, this is sensational. We quite often get bored and we go, I want a new challenge. I want to take on a new challenge. Or something is thrown at us from outside. And this is where COVID discussions come into it. COVID has been thrown at us. It knocks us out of this comfort zone and back to resilient. I've now got some problems to solve. Now, this is a headset, a mindset that people need to get their head around and understand that as much as we get into this comfort zone where everything is great, every now and then we will choose to take on a new challenge. And that may be taking on a new business, taking on a new sport, getting into a new relationship, or something's thrown at us. We don't stay 100% reliable when we are thrown a new challenge, right? We slide back to this place where we go, actually, I've got some new learning to do. Now, this is a place of vulnerability, and Brené Brown talks a lot about vulnerability. This is a place of vulnerability where we've got to say, okay, I'm not 100% reliable. How can I now get into a space where I can learn as quickly as possible? If we're denying what we're going through, we're saying, no, I should be 100% reliable. I can't be resilient. I can't be bouncing back. I can't be problem solving. I've been the best in the world. Then we lock ourselves into a non-learning mindset. I've actually had I've run training programs for the RAAF high performance program. They have their own internal high performance program. I got to train some of the jet pilots, our best of the best.
Yeah, yeah.
And one of those pilots said, "Does this happen to everybody?" And I said, "Yes, this is absolutely normal. You read psychology or behavioral science manuals, you will see that when we take on a new challenge, we have new things to learn. So we have to become resilient, problem solvers again." And he literally said, "Oh, thank goodness for that. That makes it easier. I thought it was only me." Because we do get into that place where we are 100% perfect. And now people are watching us, so I can't make a mistake.
Yep.
But we've got to anticipate, if we take on a new challenge, we've got some new learning to do. The more we're vulnerable about that, the more we're understanding of ourselves, a bit of self-compassion, the quicker we will learn those skills and we will get back to that 100% reliable. And it happens throughout life. It's an infinite loop.
Yeah.
We'll get into the comfort zone. Absolutely brilliant. Now I want to take on a new challenge. It happens every time we go for a promotion at work. We are great at what we're doing. I'm bored. I want a promotion. Okay, I want that job. You take that job, you now have some new learning.
Absolutely. The other thing I'd like to chat about is you talk about risk taking versus risk management.
Yes. Yeah.
Now,
so yeah, go on.
Yeah. Risk management is an interesting concept. Tell us about, again, the difference between risk taking and risk management, and how do you manage certain risks?
Okay, so risk taking is normally associated with juveniles, with youth, and also with growth. Okay, now risk taking is quite often seen as a really negative thing. We shouldn't take risks, and these young guys take all these weird risks. They shouldn't be doing that. I'm sorry, that's how we grow. No matter where we get to in life, that's how we grow. When I approach a person and ask them, say I want to get into a relationship with a lady, and I approach them and say, "Are you interested? Would you like to go out on a date?" That's a risk. So we are always going to be taking risks, but risk taking is just doing it blatantly and going, "I don't care what happens, let's just see." And that is dangerous. Risk management is what I did prior to going into Star Group, and certainly what was honed while I was in Star Group. Let's take a look at the realistic risks that we're facing and then prepare ourselves for them. Whenever we take a risk, we see an opportunity. There's an opportunity for growth, opportunity for benefit. There is always some sort of benefit that comes out of taking this risk, whether it's personal excitement, whether it's building a business, whether it's monetary, whether it's relationship, whatever it might be. But there is always a negative consequence that could come out of it. And we need to prepare ourselves for both. And this is risk management. What are the skills I have? What's the training I've had? What's the experience I've had? What's the exposure I've had? What have I seen other people deal with it? How have I dealt with these sorts of risks and opportunities personally before? And most importantly, what are the gaps I have in my skill set that may hinder me in achieving what I want to achieve? And when we consider all those risks and we say, there are two levels of comfort that come out of considering the risks this way. And the first level of comfort is, actually, this is really risky. It's big. It's going to be expensive. It could challenge my ego, my pride, my self-importance. But I've got the skills. I've got the management. I've got the finances in place. I've got the logistics. I've got the people. I've got the team. I've got the infrastructure. Actually, even if the worst happens, we can manage this. Excellent. Let's confidently go forward. And that is confidently go forward, not go forward going, "I don't know if we're going to be able to do this. I hope we've managed it. We've articulated all the skills we have. Let's go forward confidently." When we go forward confidently, we've got more chance of success rather than tentatively. The second level of comfort is, I don't have the skills. I don't have the people. I don't have the finance, all those other things. I need to step away from this. There is a gap that I need to go and find some skills to fill or some resources to fill. And once I've got those, then I can come back and do it. Okay. Or it may be just, actually, this is too risky. The reward for me isn't great enough. I'm not going to do it. It was a stupid choice right from the beginning.
So the old risk versus reward analysis.
Absolutely. And that is essentially what it is. But it's also about contingency planning. It's also about having those open, honest, confronting conversations. The risk versus reward. I'm sure you've probably been on committees where people are doing the risk versus reward. Should we do this? Should we do this? And there's an elephant in this corner of the room that nobody's talking about.
Yep.
This
You
is
bet.
the open, honest, confronting conversation. If we don't prepare for that elephant in the corner of the room, that's the one that's going to bounce up and potentially destroy whatever it is we want to do.
Is it whether it's in business, relationships, whatever the case may be, is it practical to assume that you can be aware of every potential risk? And I'll extend on that, and I'll just drag in our friend COVID for the moment.
Great question. Yep.
For the moment, how could have anybody, and my heart absolutely bleeds for the tourism industry and hospitality that are basically they're like pinballs in a pinball machine. How could somebody in business possibly have ever foreseen or planned for this kind of an event?
Yeah, no, great question. And in business, can we anticipate every possible challenge? No, we can't anticipate everything, but we need to take a look at history. I am taking on this opportunity. I'm going to take on this challenge. What's the history? What things have happened in the past? This is applicable particularly in business when we're making normal business decisions, and I'll get to specifically COVID in a minute. But what's happened to people in the past? What challenges have they faced? Oh, they faced those challenges. A lot of people will say, I'm the lucky one. I'm never going to have to deal with that. I don't need to think about it. When I go into contingency planning and then making choices, when I do my planning, the third level of knowledge in my model for durability, it starts with vision, it goes to knowledge. There's 3 levels of knowledge. The third level of knowledge of what are the indicators that tell me it's going well and it's going badly. And then we need to plan for each one of those indicators so that if we see them, we're able to not be flexible, we're able to be agile and say, I've anticipated this, this is what I'm going to do. Now, this is contingency planning for those things that we can anticipate. When something like COVID hits and we go, oh my gosh, but it's also something like the earthquakes that happened in New Zealand. And absolutely, and I can't remember the town that was devastated in the Southern Island. The ground turned to basically liquid and consumed everything. How do we anticipate those sorts of things? Quite often we can't, because maybe we don't know, we're not aware of it. But the idea of human durability is that we have so many plans available to us because we've done the contingency planning. We don't just have plan A, plan B, oh my gosh, neither of those work, I don't know what to do now. We will have, and I describe it as having 26 options, A to Z. And when we have A to Z and something happens, we're able to go, oh my gosh, I didn't anticipate this, but I've got 26 options already available to me. Actually, if I take plan C and put it together with plan K, actually, I've now got A1, that's an opportunity. When we've only got 2 options available to us, we will get overwhelmed. And once we're in overwhelm, we go into fight and flight panic mode.
Yeah.
And doing any sort of creative thinking and planning in panic mode doesn't work well. But if we've got 26 options available to us and we go, oh gosh, I've already got those, how can I then get creative with those? It flows a little bit easier. And certainly when I did get shot, as much as I'd anticipated it, I actually didn't know how it was going to feel. I didn't know what I was going to do. I anticipated I could do this, and this is something that's very important to managing risk and those things that become unexpected. What I did in my mind was I said, if I do get shot, this is absolute perfection, and this is what I want to do, A, B, C, D. But I also said, if I get shot and I'm not able to do that, I may end up down the other end of a continuum, which is absolute chaos, X, Y, Z. If I do end up down here, how will I want to respond to that? And how will I manage those challenges? And so I'd considered both the good and the bad, both the perfect outcome and the worst case scenario. And I'd contingency planned for all of those. And it certainly was an amalgamation of lots of things that I thought and then went, I can manage this. And
There's-
it also helps to have a really good team around you.
Hmm,
And that's the one thing that I had in Star Group, an absolutely sensational team.
hmm,
That gives us an optimistic outlook
sure.
that I've got a good team who are here to support me. For the 3 hours I was lying on the ground, that's what I relied on. That's where I drew confidence from. And then I was able to do the contingency planning. It helped me to relax my mind and get creative. There's a neurological process that when we get into fight and flight panic mode, our amygdala part of the brain,
Yeah.
the little almond-shaped part of the
Mm.
brain, kicks in and says, actually, you don't need blood, a lot of blood to the brain. We need more blood to the major organs so that you can fight or fly. And the frontal lobe, where we do our creative thinking, our higher level planning, all that higher level thoughts, and that gets shut off because all the blood goes to other areas of the body. The greater we can relax, the sooner we can relax, the sooner that blood flow goes back to the frontal lobe, and we can start doing creative thinking and having some idea of what we're going to deal with, some idea of how we're going to deal with it. 26 options available to us. We're able to go, actually, no, I've considered these sorts of things before. Our mind starts to relax, our body relaxes, we get that blood flow back, and we can get more creative. And this happens with minor risks as well as the massive things like COVID.
Yeah. I'm curious, just moving sideways just for the moment.
Yeah.
In the police force, do you do work with the police force? Like, I can't imagine that I don't know how many police officers there are in South Australia, but of the thousands, I would suggest
4,000. Yeah.
4,000. I find it really hard to believe that 4,000 police officers would have the thought process and the mindset that you had and or developed.
You're right. One of my friends in Star Group, immediately after the shooting, he came to visit me in hospital. We were talking about how I survived and what my thought processes were, and he was astounded with it. And he was in Star Group, and he told me that he went back and spoke to other Star Group officers and said, "Have you ever thought about it in this way?" And they hadn't. The only thing that's different, I believe, is that I looked at the risks at the highest level and then said, how have I managed little risks? What was the process I used for managing those little risks? And how can I then use that process for those massive risks? And it was exactly the same thing. I don't think that what I did was anything really astounding, except for the fact that I put it in place for a massive risk. As I say, the process is exactly the same as driving a car where you're absent-minded, thinking about other things, and you respond to it because you're prepared for it. I just prepared myself for that higher level. And that was having that conversation about the elephant in the corner of the room.
Yeah.
And I even went to the extent of having a conversation with my wife at the time, going into Star Group, and this is 5 years prior to the shooting. Going into Star Group, real possibility I may be shot and injured, I may be shot and killed. If I get injured, this is my philosophy. And my philosophy was anything better than death is a bonus. Even if I spend the rest of my life in a wheelchair, this is a reality. This could really happen. If I spend the rest of my life in a wheelchair, you need to know anything better than death is a bonus, because all I wanted to do was be able to interact with my kids.
Sure.
That was the most important thing to me. I didn't want to end up in a wheelchair. I didn't want to get shot, but I had to realistically prepare for it. I then had to have a conversation with her. If I get shot and I die, what's your life going to look like? And it was about her at that stage, because I'm dead, I'm gone. What's her life going to look like? And this is the confronting conversation of, does she go on and get married? Does she stay single? Does she do something else? I will tell you, I threw an option to her that she built a little shrine in the corner of the room and worshipped each day. It wasn't popular. So as much as we're talking about serious, challenging stuff, we can have fun in the midst of it, right? We can break that tension, and that's a really important thing. But it was about taking the uncertainty out of the future for her. If we hadn't had that discussion, she might have gone through the future with me having died and going, oh, what would Derrick have wanted for me? Would he have wanted me to get married? Would he have wanted me to stay single? I don't know what to do. I want to honor him. All those sorts of things. We had the discussion. She could do anything she wanted so long as she was happy and so long as my children were looked after.
Sure.
And that took out that ambiguity, that uncertainty for her. And she could then go through the future confident that she was doing what was important to her while still doing what was honorable by me, if that was a thing that needed to be judged.
There's absolutely no question that, you talk about the work of Brené Brown and that elephant in the room. And the biggest challenge most people have is their unwillingness, or whatever you want to call it, to have those difficult conversations. Because, of course, often the first reaction of the other person is, oh, I don't even want to think about that. I don't want to talk about that. But there's a high probability, as you said, going into the work that you were in, that there was always that possibility that you would be shot and or killed. It's only prudent to have those conversations. Yet we look at other situations in life, and whether it's you're in business and you go broke and you lose your house and goodness knows whatever else, and we need to have those conversations because it just makes things, I guess, so much more palatable and so much more provides that element of, I guess, certainty to a point. Is that fair call?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And one thing that I've learnt is, as human beings, we want a level of certainty. And so when we can sit down and have those conversations, police officers, Army, Navy, anybody involved in that high risk environment, they need to be able to have those difficult conversations. And mate, I have a confession to make, Derrick. I've actually, as I said, I've known about your story for many years. I watched it unfold on television back in '94. I've been thinking about contacting you to be a guest on my podcast for quite some time, and I didn't do that analysis. Well, okay, what's the risk versus the reward? And it was only by destiny that we met at that breakfast that morning, and I approached you, and I thank you for being a willing participant in my podcast. So
thank you. I really appreciate that,
mate. It's been great. Look, Derrick, I could talk to you for days. I'm just fascinated by not only your story, but indeed the work that you do. And I hope there's an opportunity moving forward that we can have another chat. Before we wind up, is there any last pearls of wisdom, anything you'd like to share with our listeners and viewers?
Con, I'd love to just pick up on what you just articulated so well about certainty, uncertainty. That's what we're all looking for in life.
Mm.
That's our comfort zone. When we are certain that everything is going to be okay, that's our comfort zone. And that's that point of durability.
Mm.
Uncertainty is resilience, where we go, oh my gosh, I'm not sure what's going to happen. How will I be able to handle this? But I've got good skills. I'll be able to bounce back. It's a confident place to be. But that's the difference between resilience and durability.
Mm.
And when we have that certainty, that's when we have no stress. This is where mental health is in its best place.
Mm.
And when we take that leap and take on a challenge, and we crash and burn, because sometimes it does, and it does for me as well. We don't want to crash and burn right back down to the ground. We just want to come back to that place where, okay, I know I'm good here. Let's get my confidence back. Let's get into this stress-free zone, get my head set right, and then take on another challenge. But most of us go, I've failed at this. I'm useless. I'm destroyed. So that's certainly what I'm looking at. It's about high-performance people. It's about high-performance mental fitness, agility, and strength. And those three things, fitness, agility, and strength. Two things that I'd ask the listeners to do going forward. One is self-compassion. Understand, we make mistakes. My gosh, when we get down to actually analysing the shooting on that day, I made mistakes. And I acknowledge them, but I don't continuously berate myself from them. For them, I learn and I move forward. The other thing that will reduce stress the mental stress and put us in a good position, is compassion for other people. Sometimes we go, why? Why did you do that? Why did you cut me off on the road? Why did you make that decision? People have their own lives. They have their own impacts. We don't often know what they are. So if we make generous assumptions about other people and have compassion for them, that will reduce our stress. It's still deal with reality. I've got this challenge to deal with because of that choice. But self-compassion and compassion for other people, our mental health will rise and our stress levels will lower.
Great points. And look, some of the things that we say to ourselves, we would never in a million years say to another person. We are just so hypercritical and so devaluing of ourselves in so many situations. Derrick, the biggest problem that I see is that there's only one of you, and we need to work out how to clone you so you can get out there, because I can't see any group in society that wouldn't benefit massively from the work and the message that you have. I wish you well in the work that you do. And if viewers and listeners, you need to first of all understand and read Derrick's story, but more importantly, the work that he does is absolutely invaluable. Derrick, it's been an absolute pleasure. I thank you so much for your time. My name is Con. I am the Conversationalist, and until next time, bye for now.